I remember that occasion because I started getting very tired. It was very hot. And they asked me, do you want to carry on? We can get, you're a senior monk, we can get a car for you to take you back. I said, no way. Instead, I started walking faster. And when you walk faster, you're actually starting to use up some of your inner energy. And I was starting to walk faster and faster. And soon, so the other monks could hardly keep up with me. And I finished that 4-hour walk full of energy. And it's a strange thing to say that when you do relax to the max, you start to get some inner energy up, the energy of your meditation. I had a wonderful time there. In the very end, just before I had to leave the ceremony and go back to get the aircraft back to Perth, then I was telling people, they asked me, can you please teach us something to remember you by? And I said, yes, I can. And I told them, I don't need to translate this into Korean. Just say after me, relax. You had all these 6,000 South Koreans repeating after me, relax. And then to the max, to the max. Bye-bye. And then I left. And that was the last words they remembered me by, relax to the max. And that is actually one of the wonderful sayings of meditation. Learning how to relax, not just a little bit, but relax very deeply. And if you can relax very deeply, right now, you find your body feels good. If you have to do some energetic work, like a 4-hour walk, you can still have your energy to walk. If you have to give a talk, then you can give the talk really easily when you can relax to the max. Because what you're doing there is you're not worrying yourself about anything to do with the future. You're not carrying the past around. You're just really getting into this moment and learning how to be at peace in this moment. A little word like relaxing. I didn't need to know much of the South Korean language to be able to notice the power that those words have for all parts of your life. Sometimes people think, oh no, I've got to work, I've got lots of things to do, much to achieve. And they think, no, you've got to put forth effort in. When you think you're going to put forth effort, you are just thinking too much about the future and worrying too much. When you relax to the max, you really get into this present moment, you get into the silence, and you've got this amazing natural energy which allows you to perform. There's many of these simple examples. This is one example which, I don't know why I'm focusing on South Korea right now, but every now and again I get invitations to really interesting opportunities to teach meditation. And once I got this invitation, it was a couple of years earlier, to go to South Korea for the, I think it was a 2018 World Computer Conference, to give the keynote address at that big conference attended by so many executives. Now, you know that keynote address is what's supposed to set the theme for the whole conference. And when I got there, the first thing they asked me is, what are you doing here? We never realized you were a computer expert. And where's Angie gone? But Angie knows I don't know too much about computers or IT. But that wasn't the point. There's so much else you understood through the practice of relaxing to the max, through the practice of being an international monk, of being able to deal with problems and difficulties for all those years of my monastic life. It's actually, and it's 48 years now I've been a monk. So it's I should be qualifying for my retirement soon. But can a monk retire? Unfair. No, but instead, you don't need to, because this is like retirement. And it's amazing just how much you can produce in those 48 years of sitting in a cave or in a jungle, or those books which I have written. Amazing how popular they have been, and all done just through the power of relaxing to the max. So don't think that if you really relax, you're wasting time. You're actually making the best use of the limited time that we have. So anyway, when I was at this conference in South Korea, having to give the keynote address, and then I began by picking up the bottle of water which they gave me. And many of you have heard this before, but it's powerful, so I'm going to tell it again. How heavy is this bottle of water? I remember teaching this at the London School, the London School of Economics, at the Imperial College in London, when I was visiting London some years ago. How heavy is this bottle of water? I asked. Now, anyone who knows Imperial College in London is one of the top innovative colleges of London University. And so straight away someone looked at this and they said, about 250 grams. I said, that's not what I mean. How heavy is this bottle of water? The longer I hold it, the heavier it feels. If I keep holding this for 1 minute, it starts to feel really heavy. After 2 minutes, I'll be in pain. After 5 minutes, I will be in agony and a very, very stupid monk. What should I do when it gets too heavy to hold comfortably? Put it down and relax to the max, rest. And if you put it down for 1 or 2 minutes, I haven't got 1 or 2 minutes right now, I'm just going to put it down for 30 seconds. And I pick it up again, it feels light. It actually does. If you don't believe me, you can try this at lunchtime. To see just how putting things down for a little while, relaxing, takes away the stress of all the work you have to do. Push down the burden, allows your energies to come back again so that you can perform to a higher level of competence no matter what you have to do in life. Learning how to relax, strangely, is one of the things they do not teach you at school or university, but we teach you here. Simple things. And once you can learn how to put things down and relax, you find you regenerate not just your physical energies, but your mental energies. So often in our world, that you have to write an email out to somebody or answer a difficult question because that's part of your job. And it's a very difficult answer because there's lots of emotional baggage behind the question. And when it is like that, how can you give a good answer? Sometimes when people ask me something on the internet, in my email or something, it's difficult to get a good answer. I just turn off the internet and meditate for a little while. Because I know that I can try this answer, that answer, any old answer, but it's not really high quality answer. But I've done this for such a long time in my life, and I know now that when your mind is not clear, you cannot produce high-quality answers. But if you can learn how to relax quickly and swiftly, you can get great answers. They just almost come to you. You know how to make use of your brain in a wise way, instead of trying to exploit the brain and forcing it. So little by little, you can deal with so many difficulties in life without getting stressed out. It also means that you do manage to keep good health and a reasonably good life. All of this is because you know how to make use of your brain and rest it. Sometimes you've got lots and lots of problems in your life. And even notice when there are lots of problems in your life, lots of things to do, it's so difficult to find answers. People are on your back all the time. Fortunately, here in Singapore and many other places in the world, we have these great places in almost every office or complex or wherever. I think even here, they're called, you can go to them any time of the day or night, even when you're busy at work. You can always go to the rest room. When you go to the rest room, what do you do in the rest room? Do you take a rest? That's what it says on the door, rest room. So go and sit in there, take a rest. Don't take the computer in there. Leave it alone. And sit in there and have a rest. Got nice comfortable seats there. You can sit down there, close the door. No one will disturb you when you're inside. And if your boss at work says, "Where have you been all this time?" "I was in the restroom." "But you were in there for half an hour." "Yes," tell your boss, "I was constipated." That's not lying. You weren't physically constipated, but you were mentally constipated. And you needed to do some meditation there to learn how to rest and relax to the max. And then afterwards, when you come out, you can enjoy the work, you're very productive. That is why that particular piece of advice, which is based on something which Ajahn, my teacher in Thailand, taught me, but which I developed, and that putting down the heavy weight and resting and picking up again afterwards, it doesn't feel heavy at all. That was actually part of, from those talks which I gave, became part of Harvard Business School. They called it an investment of time. Have you got enough time in your life? Or do you really feel your time poor? A lot of occasions we really feel that we're always pushed to do so much and we don't have enough time in our life. And because of that, even like during lockdown periods, I was really surprised over in Australia during the lockdown period when we couldn't go anywhere. And people were still complaining. "What are you complaining about? You always said you didn't have enough time. Now you've got all the time you want. You can't go to work, it's lockdown. You can't go out to see your grandmother, it's lockdown. You can't go anywhere, it's lockdown. You've got all this time in the world," which is one of the reasons why, as a Buddhist monk, I never called it lockdown. I called it retreat. And that was actually one of the first plane trip I did was not actually out of the country, was over to Melbourne. We've got lots of groups over there. And when I came back from Melbourne, I was so disappointed. I was going to Melbourne for a week or two. When I came, I was really looking forward to having to go into quarantine. Because that was what the government said. You go over to Melbourne, you come back to Western Australia, to Perth, you have to go in quarantine for 7 days. But then, the day before I landed back in Perth, the local government abolished quarantine. And I was very unhappy. I was really looking forward to that. 7 days I could just be by myself, nothing to do. So little by little, it depends on one's attitude towards what happens to you in life. And little by little, we learn how to relax no matter what happens to us. And little by little, when we learn how to relax and put that cup down, we can be far more efficient in our life and far more healthy, which is one of the reasons why you do find in our modern world many places. Like, I remember years ago going to San Francisco and going into Google headquarters and then going into Facebook headquarters. There were lots of people there were meditators and they wanted to hear about meditation. You know, the only difference between, at that time, about 5 or 6 years ago, between Google headquarters and Facebook headquarters in Mountain View, in Google headquarters, they gave you free bicycles to go from site to site. And in Facebook headquarters, they didn't give you free bicycles, they gave you free skateboards. And they asked me, "I'm going to do a skateboard." I declined. Otherwise, you'd had photographs of me in a skateboard. Is that a good idea? Anyway, in those places, they all had meditation rooms. So people at any time of the day or night, because they worked whenever they wanted to. Sometimes they just stayed there for long periods of time. They could go in there and meditate and get innovation, new ideas. I think Angie already mentioned to you that before I was a monk, I was a school teacher, theoretical physicist, and I still remember many of my friends who were also pretty much doing the same stuff as I was doing. And one of them was this fellow called Brian Josephson. He was a quantum physicist, older than I was, and he was the person who developed what we call quantum tunneling. And he had to fight for his ideas. They weren't readily accepted at first. But eventually he prevailed, and it became the foundation for supercomputers running at close to 0 degrees Kelvin. And he was also awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics for that discovery. It's quite a big achievement, Nobel Prize for Physics. And he got that after he was meditating, making his mind peaceful and still. And from that, seeing what other people couldn't see, going deeper into stuff. That's why relaxing to the max made him far more productive. Many of us, we know how to do things, so we imagine. We do not know how to relax. And that's one of the reasons why we're here, learning about meditation. I'm not sure that how many of you have seen, for example, some of the books which I have written. The first book which I wrote was a book called Opening the Door of Your Heart. It's been a very, very popular book. I remember somebody called me from Adelaide. They went into the local bookshop trying to find it. At first they could not see it anywhere in there because they found the owner of the big bookshop had categorized that book, Opening the Door of Your Heart, in the medical section under heart surgery. They didn't even bother to open the pages and look what it was. But anyway, that the way that book was written I always love telling this story. There was a lady who I was teaching week after week meditation. And then somebody told me, said she's in really big trouble. And it was her relationship. She was splitting off from her partner of many years, from her husband. And maybe some of you have experienced that. It's very traumatic. And she was coming to the meditation and talks I was giving in Perth, and they were really helping her. And afterwards she said, you cannot keep these great teachings just to yourself. You must be able to share them with as many people as you possibly can. Please write them down in a book. And of course I answered, nah, too busy. Not just that, because I'd been told by these Zen monks when I was young. These Zen monks would say to me, anyone who writes a book, anyone, any book, will have to spend the next 7 lifetimes born as a donkey. I did like, and I've written many books now. I've got so many reincarnations as donkeys, so please, if you ever see a donkey, please be kind to them. That might be Ajahn. Of course, I didn't believe that. But nevertheless, I thought there's so many books around, not enough people doing stuff and practicing it. So I declined. So she said she would write the book herself. And so she sent me some drafts. She was a very, very clever woman. She totally outsmarted me, because the stories which she wrote down and sent to me were absolutely hopeless. Bad English, not exactly what I said. So I said, no, I can't let that be published. I'll have to do it myself, I said. And she smiled, mission accomplished. That's what she intended all along. So I did it myself. And the way I wrote that book, I had a 15 days personal retreat. I'm not going to spend that retreat writing all the time. I just did 1 hour every day, nothing more, just 1 hour, with a biro pen on notepaper. I wrote it down an hour a day, and after 15 days, actually 14 days, I had half the book finished. I still got that manuscript today. Or even, sometimes people wanted to auction it online, but I managed to get it back. And to see it handwritten, hardly any mistakes, done so quickly. I had a break and then wrote the second half, almost a similar amount of time. That's only 14 hours work, times 2. That's how long it took me to write that book, Opening the Door of Your Heart. And again, I could not type it up. I didn't have computers in those days. So I got a friend to type it up. They typed it up. And I was going to Melbourne to give some talks. And I said, it'd be great if you can give me the little CD. Remember the CDs of the talks? So a CD of it all written out, all typed out. And they got it to me just as I was going to the airport to fly to Melbourne. And I just put it in my bag. And the first stop in Melbourne was the university. I gave a talk there. And after giving the talk, this lady came up. I will always remember her name. How can you forget a name which is Magnolia Flora? F-L-O-R-I. It was her real name, Magnolia Flora. And she said, I work in the publishing industry. If ever you have, there's a great talk, she said, if ever you have anything you want published, please let me know. And I reached in my bag, here you are. And I gave it to her like that. That's how easy it was to find a publisher. Even J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter had to go to many publishers to get Harry Potter's books. Not me. Just can we publish your book? Yeah, here we go. And of course, it has been a legitimate bestseller a lot of the time because it's not telling people the theory of relaxation and meditation. It's telling people how it's done with simple things. Like one of the meditation techniques, which I've been teaching before, how you can put things down, is what I've called, it's one of the stories in that book, called The Emperor's 3 Questions. And that story I remember reading when I was a student at Cambridge. In those days, you had lots of free time. I really feel for students these days who've got so many assignments, lectures, tutorials, so much to do. In those days at Cambridge, this was 69 to 72, in those days that your study time was only sort of 90 days a year. Sorry, no, that's wrong. It was, 180 days a year, 3 terms. Most days of the year you were not in college, you were free. And even the amount of work you had to do while you were in term was not that much. And there was a reason behind that. And the reason was, as I was taught when I first went up to a great university like Cambridge, was that there's so many other professors in other disciplines, in this university. Go and listen to other lectures, not just in physics. I remember going to lectures in philosophy, lectures in economics, lectures in architecture. Wherever there was a good lecturer, you went there because you weren't focusing your education just on one subject. You had a wide range of subjects. And the wider those range of subjects were, the more you learned a width of knowledge and understanding. You weren't just focused on one particular part. And that was so helpful wherever you found an interest. The great assets of the university were there for you. It was like going into a restaurant with so many different types of food. You didn't just eat the type of food which you liked or grew up in. You went to experiment, experience so many different types. I found that so helpful, having a wide knowledge base. And it's the same, just with some of the things which you even do now when you teach meditation. Get a wide knowledge base. And one of the things was, again, I love literature, especially Russian literature. And you read, I remember I finished all my assignments, just 1.5 term, and so I got War and Peace out of the library and just sat down and read that for a week. It's a big book, it takes a lot of reading, but I love that sort of stuff. And then I went to lectures on quantum physics or astrophysics of the galaxy, as well as War and Peace. You get a wide, balanced understanding of the world. But in one of Leo Tolstoy's stories, it was The Emperor's 3 Questions. And this was a book which had stories by Chekhov and Dostoevsky as well, short stories. And it was being used as raising money for the Jewish community over in Russia, who were just being discriminated against at the time. But anyway, the story of The Emperor's 3 Questions impressed me from the beginning because it taught me something I never expected. The Emperor's 3 Questions was a folk tale about an emperor who was fed up with religion. Had it up to here with religions always arguing with one another who's the best. So instead, he decided to make up his own religion. He was an emperor. So he decided there's only 3 questions you really need to know the answers for. And those 3 questions became the emperor's 3 questions. And the first question was so easy to get an answer for today. When is the most important time? The second question was, who is the most important person? And the third question, what is the most important thing to do? The when, the who, the what. And after a long little tale, the emperor finally found the answers to those questions, not from a philosopher, not from a monk or from a priest, but from life. And of course, when is the most important time? It's always now. It's the only time you have. That's one of the reasons, if you're going to relax to the max, do it now. A lot of times people ask me, when is the best time to meditate? You know what the answer is? Now. When is the worst time to meditate? Later on. There's a lot of wisdom in that. We always put off things until it's too late. So when is the most important time? It's always now. When is the most important time to say sorry to someone you've hurt? You shouldn't have done that. Say it now. When is the most important time to tell, say maybe your mum or your dad, just how much you respect them and care for them? Not always agree with them, but care for them. Do it as soon as you can. Now is the best time. And why is it, especially in meditation, we always get burdened with carrying our past? It's like seeing someone struggling up a muddy mountainside, covered in sticky mud, carrying a very heavy backpack on their back, and they're struggling. Does that remind you of your life? Climbing up a muddy hillside with a very heavy backpack on. Why do we do that? Can't we actually put that backpack down? I've often said, it's one of my sayings here, have you ever seen a bird in the sky? A bird who's migrating from one continent to another continent, carrying a backpack, suitcases, trolleys. I say that because I just come in through the airport a couple of days ago. Why are people carrying so much baggage? Birds never do that. So little by little, we learn how to be in this moment much more and carry less baggage, especially baggage from the past or the future. I don't know if anyone's ever told you how to let go of the past and how to let go of the future. We know we're supposed to do it, but how do you do it? That's coming in a moment. The next question, who is the most important person? Now, I know that some of you have heard me several times before. If you haven't heard me repeat the story, or if you didn't read it for yourself in one of my books, or in even the original from Count Leo Tolstoy, who is the most important person? Sometimes you may be religious and think, oh, it's God, or it's Buddha, or it's Mohammed, or whatever. Who is the most important person in the world? And the answer is, and don't say yourself, that's egocentric. It's a much deeper answer than that. The most important person in the world is always the person right in front of you. Now, they're the most important person in the whole world. Before COVID and economic problems and political problems, I remember giving that little story to Cathay Pacific when I was invited there to give talks, and the HR manager really took it on and instituted that as part of their trainee development in Cathay Pacific, to tell all of the, especially the cabin staff, the person in front of you, whoever they happen to be, is the most important person in the world. So you can connect with them. And when I heard that, I was a student. I was always interested in things in the world. I would ask questions. I remember asking questions of professors. I remember just the professor of astrophysics of the galaxy, that was Stephen Hawking's professor, Professor Sharma. You go up to him and ask him a question, but I was only a hairy student. I had big hair and a beard at that time. You wouldn't recognize me now. You see just a bald head and just clean shaven. But we used to call that the donut look. So it's curly hair around the top, and where the hair stopped, the beard started. It was very efficient to keeping you warm in the snowy days in London, the donut look. But anyway, you go and ask these famous professors a question you're really interested in, and they would say, no. They would actually push you away. You were not important. You were just a small, insignificant student. Has that ever happened to you? That's why sometimes I get into trouble, because sometimes you want to ask a question or get a book signed or something. I really try my hardest to make sure that you feel important. When you come up and say hello or say something, I get into trouble for that. But I don't mind. I remember Changi Airport a few years ago. I was just going from one aircraft to another aircraft, just in transit. And then I saw some Indonesian students. No students, they were Buddhists. They were going from Indonesia to India on pilgrimage. And they said, "Oh, Ajahn Brahm, this must be a lucky day. Can we have a photograph of you?" And any Indonesians here today? From Indonesia? Indonesian students? Yeah, great. Well, I must admit, of all the people in the world, you take the most photographs. Honestly. So first of all, individual photographs, then family photographs, then the whole group photographs. And I did just one more. Satu dua tiga. And it took forever to get all the photographs done. And I said, "Look, I've got a flight to catch." I said, "Oh, just one more." When I got actually to the gate, they were calling out my name. "Would Mr. Brahmawangso please come quickly? The gate is closing, 1 or 2 minutes." It was worth it. Simply because everybody, if they're right in front of you, becomes the most important person in the whole world. And that's called connection. I don't know your family life. People who, you're married to, it's your children, how often do you think, oh, they're always there? They're not so important as a person you can only meet once or twice. But they are. If your little kid is in front of you, please make them feel as if they're the most important person in the whole world. And then you'll find you have a wonderful relationship. My parents, especially my father, was an excellent example. He wasn't honest. I've got to be honest about him. But he was always very loving and kind. So when I was 11 years of age, I got a place in the school, only a primary school, the school soccer team. I was so excited. Dad, I got a place in the school soccer team. They're playing on Saturday. Can you come? And my father replied, "Sorry, son, I'm working on Saturday mornings." I'm only a kid, but it really hurt me. I felt playing for the school was a big thing in my life. And now my father couldn't come and see me. And so anyway, I just went to the game, put on my kit, went out to play. And after about 5 minutes of playing my first game for the school, I heard someone shout out, come on son, you can do it. It was my father's voice. When I turned around, he was there cheering me on. I couldn't believe it. And after the match was finished, I said, Dad, how did you get here? You're supposed to be working. He said, yes, son, I am supposed to be working. I told my boss I've got a series of medical appointments, injections every Saturday morning at the time we're playing soccer. He'd lied to his boss to see his son play soccer. His love for his kid was greater than security in his employment. And that meant a lot to me. And that's one of the reasons why he kind of exemplified. A little kid, the person right in front of you, was the most important person in the world to him. And to emphasize that story, there was a story I've told many times. Years ago, there was a father came home from work, late as usual, busy at the office, and his 6 or 7-year-old son was waiting for him. Daddy, welcome home. Daddy, how much do you earn at work? And the daddy said, what are you talking about? None of your business. I'm tired. But Daddy, how many dollars do you earn at work? Look, I told you, son, it's none of your business. Daddy, how many dollars do you earn an hour at the office? Look, I told you, son, that's the 3rd time. Go to your room. He sent the son to the room. And the son just walked up to his room, went inside. And then the father realized it's only a simple question from his son. Why should he be so angry at his son for doing something like that? So he went into the room, his son's room, and apologized and said, son, I don't know why you want to know how much I earn at work, but I shouldn't have shouted at you. I'm sorry. And just to let you know, I earn $20 an hour at work. $20 an hour. And the son smiled at his daddy. Thank you, Daddy. Now, can I please borrow $10? Normally, the father would say no, but he got angry once already at his son. So he took out his wallet and took out a $10 note. I remember telling this story in Indonesia some years ago on a radio show, and it was run by a Islamic reporter. And as soon as I told the story and finished it, she started weeping, started crying her eyes out. Because the answer to this story, how it finishes, is quite emotional. And it is related to her 100%. The father said, here's $10, son. And the little son opened up the drawer next to his bed and took out $10 in coins, counted out $20, and gave it to his daddy. Daddy, here's $20. Can I please have 1 hour of your time? So often, you care for your children. You love them. But what they really want is to see their daddy, to be with their mummy, even if the kid has to pay for it. That's what we mean by the one in front of you is the most important person in the whole world. Oh my goodness. And the last part of the question, if you're with that person, what's the most important thing to do? The most important thing to do is to care. And one of the great stories behind that, I saw this gentleman a couple of weeks ago. This gentleman, because I've been in Perth almost 40 years now, and of course, being a monk, all the Buddhists, who are there, they bring their children to see you. Not just the Buddhists, but all the other people, they sometimes come along and just get some advice or whatever. I remember this one kid, his parents were Sri Lankan, so we would come to the temple and we'd come to the little school we did for the kids. And he grew up with me. He's a smart kid, and he did well at university. He became a doctor, a medical doctor. Still a lot of work, a very smart kid. And when he was an intern at the university, so not an intern at the hospital, that he came to see me one Saturday morning, very distressed. And he told me, he said, Ajahn Brahm, I have to resign. I can't do this job anymore. And I asked him why, obviously. And that's when he told me that morning, one of his patients had died, tragically. She was a young woman, about 23, 24. And she wasn't expected to die. And he tried his best to keep her alive, but she faded away. And he had to tell her husband, the woman you're still so much in love with has gone. She's died. And the two little children beside him, you've got no mummy anymore. She's gone. He hadn't done anything wrong at all, but he felt so guilty. He later found out that it was some disease or abnormality or something. No one could be criticized for it. But nevertheless, an important woman had lost her life. And the husband just didn't know what to do. And the two children were devastated. They didn't really understand what had happened or why. And he said that having to tell the family was like turning that knife of guilt around in his heart, lacerating him inside. He said, I can't face the possibility of that happening ever again. I feel such a failure. And that's when I told him, your job, your purpose as a doctor is not to cure your patients. Please never think that that's what you have to do. If you feel that that's your purpose in life is to cure, you will fail many, many, many times. Not your fault, but you still feel a failure. Instead, your job as a doctor, the job of anybody who's a psychologist, a nurse, or whatever, your job is to care for people, not to cure them. You're in the caring professions. And as such, if you make caring your most important priority, you never, ever need to fail. You can always care for people. You can't always cure them. And he got it straight away. He didn't give up his job. He carried on. And he's a specialist now. His wife and kids just come to temple. But he realizes that's the most important thing in life, is to care for people. You'll probably realize that if you care for more people, you'll cure more as well. And that became the answer to the third question. What's the most important thing to do? It's to care. That became the Emperor's 3 questions. Very simple. Now the only time. The most important person in the world is whoever's right in front of you. And here, when you close your eyes, who's in front of you then? Then yourself. But When you're with somebody else, please, they're important. Then care for them. Now, believe it or not, that became just a beautiful way of meditating. Sometimes, if you're sick, if you're tired, you're old, you're just, how can I do any meditation? Now is the only time you have. Right now. What's in front of your mind right in this moment? What are you aware of right now? That's important. It's the most important meditation object in your life. What's happening right now? And what do you do with it? You care for it. Give it kindness. And you will find you're getting so much incredible relaxations, deep peace and stillness. Even if you're in hospital, sick, in pain, you can always care. You can always be here. And this, right now, you're not trying to get rid of it. It's going to teach you. And that is why it's important.